so that when those plans get disruptive, you don't just completely flatline as a player on that particular play, or maybe even for the rest of the game, because you're so rattled that your impeccable strategy that you laid out so carefully was distorted by what your opponents were doing. Just like you get comfortable with making plans or having patterns in terms of drills and workouts, you have to get used to and comfortable with breaking them, improvising away from them as well. And just to be a little bit more specific, beginner players, the game is much more physical for you than it is for higher level players. So when you talk about improvising on the fly and adapting a new strategy once your given goals or strategies, game plans have been disrupted by your opponents, that usually comes in the form of physically changing the way you're playing the game. Because you're a beginner, therefore the brunt of the way you play and the way you think about the game is done from a physical perspective. So physically, you're going to have to change the way you're actually moving on the court, which is fine because you're a beginner. And that is pretty much the most fundamental, elementary way that you can change the way you play out here. So if you're a beginner and that's the way you have to change and try to improvise on the fly here, it's perfectly fine to do. Just be aware of that. Now, if you're more intermediate, it's more mental. It's more how your mind sees the game and thus how you evaluate how you should play in a given situation. So when intermediate players have a plan, they get punched in the face and then they have to recover and improvise on the fly. For intermediate players, it's more of a mental change. How do you mentally adapt to what's going on in terms of what your competition is offering you? But the more practice and mastery you have of either one is going to make actual competition and the need for change and evolution inside a competition setting is going to make it so much easier, so much smoother, natural if off the court in practice, you have mastered the ability to set a plan and you've mastered the ability to change, improvise, and evolve that plan when and if necessary. The last point I want to make is to not panic. Should you have a plan and a strategy of how you're going to at least try to be successful out here? Yes. Do you absolutely need one? No, but you should have one. But if that plan and that strategy starts to fall apart because you just didn't account for whatever, or your opponents are just better than the strategy that you came up with, then that's just part of the game. You can't panic. You can't become chaotic just because your well-laid plans aren't working out the way you thought and expected them to. Part of strategizing is planning for contingencies, like, oh, what if I do this, but it doesn't work out? Or if I do this, but then I have to change to this. That's part of the planning process. Now, if you're like me and you kind of get neurotic about that kind of things, you can kind of drive yourself crazy going down all kinds of hypothetical rabbit holes of what happens if this happens? These little small intricate possibilities here and there that probably are never going to happen. You could drive yourself crazy thinking about that stuff, but really you just need to keep in mind, here's my overall general strategy of how I'm going to do this. But plans usually don't work out the way anyone plans them.